The role of women has been a topic of debate, discussion, and evolution in various religions and societies throughout history. Two of the world's largest religions, Christianity and Islam, offer distinct frameworks for the role of women, both shaped by religious teachings, cultural norms, and societal contexts. While some may view the treatment of women in these religions through the lens of tradition, others see it as a symbol of empowerment, struggle, or even repression. Understanding the role of women in both Christianity and Islam requires examining their religious texts, historical practices, and contemporary issues. The Bible and the Quran have been interpreted in various ways, with cultural differences adding layers of complexity. Yet, within these religions, women have played critical roles, from the Virgin Mary in Christianity to Khadija, the wife of Prophet Muhammad, in Islam. These figures continue to inspire believers today. We explore the historical and contemporary roles of women in Christianity and Islam, highlighting both similarities and differences. Through real-world examples, historical events, and modern challenges, we will delve into the evolving role of women in these two global faiths. The aim is to present a nuanced, balanced view of the issues at hand, offering a thorough understanding of women's rights, roles, and contributions to Christianity and Islam. The role of women in early Christianity was complex and multifaceted. Women were part of the early Christian movement from the start, serving as disciples, leaders, and even martyrs. The New Testament, which is central to Christian teachings, offers several examples of women playing critical roles in the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. One of the most significant female figures in Christianity is the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus. She is venerated as a symbol of purity, faith, and devotion. Mary Magdalene, another important figure, is often recognized for her close relationship with Jesus and as a witness to his resurrection. These women, among others, laid the foundation for the Christian faith and are honored for their roles. In many Christian denominations, particularly Roman Catholicism, the Virgin Mary holds a special place of reverence. Across the world, millions of Catholics pray to Mary as an intercessor, and shrines dedicated to her, like the famous Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, draw millions of visitors annually. However, it's important to note that women's roles in the early Christian church were not always on equal footing with men. The writings of the Apostle Paul, for example, have been interpreted in ways that both empower and limit the role of women in the church. While Paul praised women like Priscilla and Phoebe for their work in the early church, his words in letters like 1 Timothy 2:12, where he states, "I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet," have been used to justify restrictions on women's leadership roles in many Christian denominations. As Christianity grew and spread, so did debates about the role of women. Were women meant to serve quietly in the background, or could they lead as men did? This question continues to shape the discourse in Christian communities around the world. The advent of Islam in the 7th century CE brought new teachings about the role of women, particularly in terms of rights, responsibilities, and status. The Quran, the holy book of Islam, contains numerous references to women, many of which have been interpreted in different ways depending on cultural and historical contexts. In early Islamic society, women played critical roles both within the family and the broader Muslim community. The Quran introduced several reforms aimed at improving the status of women. For example, Surah An-Nisa 4:7 states, "For men is a share of what the parents and close relatives leave, and for women is a share of what the parents and close relatives leave, be it little or much, a legal share." This verse emphasizes women's rights to inherit property, which was a significant improvement compared to many pre-Islamic societies where women had few, if any, property rights. One of the most prominent female figures in Islam is Khadija bint Khuwaylid, the first wife of the Prophet Muhammad. Khadija was not only Muhammad's beloved spouse, but also a successful businesswoman who provided financial and emotional support during the early years of Islam. Her influence and devotion to Islam made her one of the most revered women in Islamic history. In addition to Khadija, other women such as Aisha, bint Abi Bakr, another wife of the Prophet, played critical roles in the development of Islamic scholarship and jurisprudence. Aisha, in particular, is known for narrating over 2,000 hadiths, traditions or sayings of the Prophet, and for being a key figure in early Islamic debates. Islam's early history shows women in pivotal roles: leaders, scholars, and businesswomen. But as Islam spread and interacted with different cultures, how did the status of women evolve? What influence did pre-Islamic traditions and local customs have on the interpretation of women's roles in Islamic society? Marriage and family life are central to both Christianity and Islam, and the roles of women in these areas have been shaped by religious teachings as well as cultural norms. Both religions emphasize the importance of family, but they approach marriage, divorce, and women's responsibilities in different ways. In Christianity, marriage is considered a sacred covenant between a man and a woman. Many Christian denominations, particularly within Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, view marriage as a sacrament, symbolizing the union of Christ and the Church. Traditional Christian teachings emphasize the roles of women as mothers and caregivers within the family, placing great importance on maintaining the household. In the Roman Catholic tradition, Pope John Paul II's apostolic letter, Mulieris Dignitatem, on the dignity and vocation of women, emphasized the unique role of women in marriage and family life. While the letter affirmed the equal dignity of men and women, it also reinforced traditional views about the complementary roles of husbands and wives. In Islam, marriage is also highly valued and considered half of one's faith. The Quran outlines clear guidelines for marriage, including the rights and responsibilities of both spouses. Surah An-Nisa 4:34 describes men as protectors and maintainers of women, a verse that has been interpreted in various ways depending on cultural context. Some see this as a call for men to provide for and protect their families, while others argue that this verse has been used to justify patriarchal control. However, Islamic law also grants women certain rights within marriage that were not common in other societies at the time of Islam's founding. For example, women have the right to own and manage their own property, even after marriage, and they have the right to seek divorce under certain conditions, a right that was revolutionary in the context of 7th century Arabia. While both religions place a strong emphasis on family, the role of women within marriage has evolved over time. In both Christianity and Islam, women are navigating changing expectations about family life and the balance between tradition and modernity. But how do modern interpretations of religious texts align with contemporary views on gender equality? One of the most visible ways that religious teachings impact women's lives in both Christianity and Islam is through concepts of modesty and dress. While both religions advocate for modesty, the way this is interpreted and practiced varies widely across different cultures and religious communities. In Christianity, modesty has traditionally been associated with humility, piety, and respect for oneself and others. In the New Testament, 1 Timothy 2:9-10 states, "I also want the women to dress modestly, with decency and propriety, adorning themselves not with elaborate hairstyles or gold or pearls or expensive clothes, but with good deeds appropriate for women who profess to worship God." For many Christian women, modesty is about avoiding vanity and showing respect for religious and societal norms. In various Christian denominations, modest dress codes are still observed today. For instance, in some branches of Pawnee, Mennonite, and Amish Undorinaichas communities, women wear long dresses and cover their hair as a sign of modesty and religious devotion. Similarly, in Roman Catholicism, nuns wear habits as a symbol of their commitment to God and a life of simplicity and modesty. Islamic teachings on modesty are more explicitly codified in the Quran, where both men and women are instructed to dress modestly. For women, this often includes wearing the hijab headscarf, which covers the hair, neck, and sometimes more, depending on cultural interpretations. The hijab is seen by many Muslim women as a symbol of their faith and a sign of modesty, though it is important to note that wearing the hijab is a choice for many, not an obligation. In countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, the wearing of the hijab or more conservative dress, such as the niqab, which covers the face, is enforced by law. However, in other Muslim-majority countries like Turkey and Tunisia, Secular governments have historically discouraged or banned the hijab in certain public spaces. This diversity in practice highlights the varying cultural and political interpretations of Islamic teachings on modesty. Modesty may be prescribed in both religions, but how much of it is truly about faith and how much is influenced by cultural and societal pressures? As debates over women's dress continue in both the East and West, what role do religion and personal choice play in shaping these practices? Religious leadership has historically been dominated by men in both Christianity and Islam, but women have made significant strides in various areas, challenging traditional gender roles and advocating for greater representation in religious spaces. The question of whether women can lead religious services, preach, or serve as clergy remains a point of contention in both religions. Women in Christian leadership. In Christianity, different denominations have different approaches to women in leadership. The Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodox Church continue to prohibit women from becoming priests or bishops, maintaining a long-standing tradition that reserves these roles for men. The Catholic Church in particular justifies this stance by pointing to the male apostles of Jesus and the Church's interpretation of biblical teachings. However, many Protestant denominations have embraced female leadership. For example, in the Anglican Communion and Methodist Church, women can be ordained as priests, bishops, and pastors. In 2015, Bishop Libby Lane became the first woman to be consecrated as a bishop in the Church of England, marking a significant milestone for gender equality in Christian leadership. In Islam, the debate over female religious leadership is ongoing. Traditionally, women have not been allowed to lead mixed-gender prayers, known as imamat, in most Islamic communities. However, women have always played roles as scholars, educators, and leaders in their own right. In recent years, a growing number of women are challenging the status quo by calling for greater inclusion in religious leadership. In 2005, Amina Wadud, an American Islamic scholar, made headlines when she led a mixed-gender Friday prayer service in New York City. This act of defiance sparked a global debate about the role of women in Islamic religious leadership. While some saw her actions as revolutionary, others viewed them as deeply controversial and against Islamic tradition. As more women push for leadership roles in both Christianity and Islam, the question remains: will religious institutions adapt to these demands for equality, or will tradition hold firm? How are women balancing their desire for representation with respect for deeply entrenched religious customs? The 20th and 21st centuries have seen a significant rise in global movements advocating for women's rights. Many of these movements have engaged with religion, either working within religious frameworks to promote women's equality or challenging religious practices that are seen as oppressive. In the Christian context, the Christian feminist movement seeks to reinterpret the Bible and Christian traditions in ways that affirm gender equality. Christian feminists argue that many of the restrictive roles assigned to women in the church are the result of patriarchal interpretations of Scripture rather than divine mandate. They advocate for equal participation in leadership, decision-making, and theological discourse. The Women-Church Convergence in the United States is an example of Christian feminists organizing for change within their religious communities. The movement calls for the ordination of women in the Catholic Church and the promotion of gender justice within all Christian denominations. Similarly, Islamic feminism. Advocates for women's rights within an Islamic framework. Islamic feminists argue that the Quran promotes gender equality and that many patriarchal practices in Muslim societies are cultural rather than religious in origin. They seek to reclaim Islamic teachings that affirm women's dignity and rights, including in areas like education, employment, and political participation. Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani activist who survived a Taliban assassination attempt for advocating girls' education, has become an international symbol of Islamic feminism. Malala argues that Islam supports women's right to education and empowerment, and she uses her platform to call for reforms in both religious and secular spaces. As women's rights movements continue to engage with religious institutions, the line between faith and feminism becomes blurred. Can religious teachings and feminist ideals coexist, or are they inherently at odds? The answer may depend on who gets to interpret the sacred texts. Women in both Christianity and Islam face new challenges and opportunities. Issues such as education, employment, political participation, and reproductive rights are at the forefront of debates about women's roles. As women become more visible in public life, they are also challenging traditional religious norms and seeking new interpretations of their faith. Both Christianity and Islam, recent reforms have allowed women to enter the workforce in greater numbers and even drive cars, something that was prohibited until 2018. These changes reflect a shift in the role of women in public life, though many women still face legal and social barriers to full equality. Women in Christian and Muslim-majority countries have also made strides in political participation, with women serving as heads of state, parliamentarians, and activists. For example, Benazir Bhutto of Pakistan became the first female prime minister of a Muslim-majority country in 1988, and Angela Merkel has served as Germany's first female chancellor since 2005. As women continue to navigate the complex intersections of faith, culture, and modernity, they are redefining what it means to be both religious and empowered. The question remains, how will the role of women in Christianity and Islam evolve in the face of these new challenges? The role of women in Christianity and Islam is as diverse as the cultures and communities that practice these faiths. From the early days of both religions to the present, women have played significant, though often contested, roles. Today, as women across the world continue to seek equality and representation, the teachings of Christianity and Islam are being re-examined and reinterpreted in new and dynamic ways. Whether through the lens of religious leadership, family roles, or feminist movements, the debate about women's roles in these two great faiths is far from settled. As the world continues to change, so too will the ways in which women navigate the balance between tradition and modernity in their faith communities. What remains constant, however, is the vital role women play in shaping the future of Christianity and Islam. Sources: the Bible, New Testament, the Quran, translations and interpretations. Mulieris Dignitatem, by Pope John Paul II, Royal Islamic Strategic Studies Center for Islamic Feminist Movements. Reports on women's rights reforms in Saudi Arabia and other Muslim-majority countries. Historical biographies: Malala Yousafzai, Amina Wadud, and Benazir Bhutto.